Chapter 3. Halt ran his fingers through his shaggy hair as he studied the list of names. Gorlog's beard, he said, using a Scandian oath that he had become quite fond of. How many people are here? Lady Pauline watched him serenely. 203, she said calmly. He looked up from the list, appalled. 203? He repeated, and she nodded. He shook his head and dropped the sheet of parchment on his desk. Well, we're going to have to pare it down, he said. Pauline frowned slightly in concentration. Then she considered his statement. We could possibly get rid of these three, she said. I'm not that sure I really need the Iberian ambassador and his two idiot daughters at my wedding. She took a quill and scored the last three names off the list, then looked up at him and smiled brightly. There, all done. Wasn't that easy? Halt shook his head distractedly, taking the list again and scanning through it. But 200 people? Do we really have 200 people to get married? Well, they're not getting married, dear. We are, she said, deliberately misunderstanding him. He scowled at her. Normally Hart's scowl was a fearsome thing, but it held no terrors for Lady Pauline. She raised an eyebrow at him, and he realized he might as well drop the scowl. He went back to the list, jabbing his finger at one section. I suppose the king has to come, he began. Well, of course he does. You are one of his oldest advisors, she pointed out. And Evelyn, Cassandra, she's a friend. But who are all the others? There must be 15 in the royal party. 17, Lady Pauline said. After all, the king can't travel without his retinue. He and Cassandra can't just hop on their horses and turn up on wedding day and say, We're here for the wedding. Where do we sit? There's a certain amount of protocol involved. Protocol, Halt snorted derisively. What a load of rubbish. Halt, said the elegant diplomat, when you asked me to marry you, did you think we could just sneak off into a glade in the woods with a few close friends and get it done? Halt hesitated. Well, no, of course not. As a matter of fact, that was exactly what he had thought. A simple ceremony, a few friends, some good food and drink, and then he and Pauline would be a couple. But he felt that it might not be wise to admit right now. The engagement of the grizzled ranger and the beautiful Lady Pauline had been the talk of Redmont Fief for some weeks now. People were amazed and delighted that this seemingly ill-matched and well-respected pair were to become man and wife. It was something to wonder about, to gossip about. Little else had been discussed in Redmont during the last few weeks. There were those who pretended not to be surprised. Baron Errold of Redmont was one of them. I always knew it, he told anyone who would listen. Always knew there was something going on between those two. Saw it coming years ago. Knew it before they did, probably. And indeed, there had been the occasional vague rumors over the years that Halt and Pauline had been something more than friends in the past. But the majority of the people had dismissed such talk, and neither Halt nor Pauline ever said anything about the matter. When it came to keeping secrets, few people could be more tight-lipped than rangers and the members of the diplomatic service. But there came a day when Halt realized that time was slipping past with increasing speed. Will, his apprentice, was in his final year of training. In a few months he would be due for graduation and promoted to the Silver Oak Leaf, the insignia of a full-fledged ranger. And that meant Will would be moving away from Redmont. He would be signed a fief of his own, and Halt sensed that the day-to-day life, so full of energy and diversion with Will around, would become alarmingly empty. As the realization had grown, he had cautiously sought the company of Lady Pauline with increasing frequency. She, in her turn, had seen his growing need for company and affection. A ranger's life tended to be a lonely one, and one that he could discuss with few people. As a courier, privy to many of the secrets of the fief and the kingdom they both served. Pauline was one of the few. Halt could relax in her company. They could discuss each other's work and give counsel to each other, and there was, in fact, a certain history between them, an understanding, some might call it, which went back to the time when they were both younger. To put it plainly, Lady Pauline had loved Halt for many years. Quietly and patiently she had waited, knowing that one day he would propose. Knowing also that, when he did, this incredibly shy and retiring man would view the prospect of a very public wedding with absolute horror. "Who's this?" he said, coming across a name he didn't recognize. "Lady Georgia of Sandalhurst? Why are we inviting her? I don't know her. Why are we asking people we don't know?" "I know her," Pauline replied. There was a certain steelness in her voice, and Halt would have done well to recognize. "She's my aunt. A bit of an old stick, really, but I have to invite her." "You've never mentioned her before," Halt challenged. "True, I don't like her very much, and as I said, she's a bit of an old stick." "Then why are we inviting her?" "We're inviting her," Lady Pauline explained, "because Aunt Georgia has spent the last 20 years bemoaning the fact that I was unmarried. 'Poor Pauline,' she'd cry to anyone who'd listen. 'She'll be a lonely old maid, married to her job. She'll never find a husband to look after her. It's just too good an opportunity to miss.'" Halt's eyebrows came together in a frown. There might be a few things that would annoy him more than someone criticizing the woman he loved, but for the moment he couldn't think of one. "Agreed," he said. "Let's hit her with the most boring people possible at the wedding feast." "Good thinking," Lady Pauline said, and she made a note on another sheet of paper. "I'll make her the first person on the boar's table." "The boar's table? I'm not sure I've heard the term." "Every wedding has a boar's table," his fiancée explained patiently. "We take all the boring, annoying, bombastic people and sit them together. That way they all bore each other and they don't bother the normal people that we've asked." "Wouldn't it be simpler to just ask people you like?" Halt asked. "Except Aunt Georgia, of course. There's a good reason to ask her. But why ask the Boers?" "It's a family thing," Lady Pauline said, adding a second and third person to the Boers' table as she thought of them. "You have to ask family, and every family has its share of annoying Boers. It's just part of organizing a wedding." Halt dropped into a curved armchair, sitting slightly sideways with one leg hooked up over the arm. "I thought weddings were supposed to be joyous occasions," he muttered. "They are, as long as you have a Boers' table," she replied. She chewed on the end of her pen, considering another list. "Now let's see that everybody has a role to play. Best man, Will, of course, and Gillen, your second groomsman. Alice and Jenny, bridesmaids. Horace can be the usher." "What does an usher do?" Halt asked. She smiled at him. "He ushers, you know. Friend of the bride, friend of the groom. He'll be good at it. Crowley has offered to give me away, which is sweet of him, and Baron Erak will perform the ceremony." She laid down the pen and sat back with a satisfied sigh. "And that's everyone. Wouldn't protocol," Halt laid special stress on the word, "suggest that the king might have some official role?" Pauline rolled her eyes in frustration. Halt was right, of course, and she sensed that he was enjoying her mistake a little too much. The innocent look in his eyes confirmed it. She took up the pen again and frowned for a moment, then triumphantly, "Patron sponsor. We'll make him patron sponsor." "And what does a patron sponsor do?" Halt asked. She shrugged. "No idea. I just made it up. But I'll think of something." She added the king's name to a list in her neat script, making a note to inform the King's Chamberlain about the concept of a patron sponsor. No problem there, she thought. Lord Anthony was an old friend. Without looking up from her work, she asked casually, "You will be getting a haircut, won't you?" Holt ran his hand through his hair. It was getting a little long, he thought. "I'll give it a trim," he said, his hand dropping unconsciously to the hilt of his sax knife. This time Pauline did look up. "You'll get a haircut," she said. Her gaze was steady and unwavering. "I'll get a haircut," he said meekly.